In this video, we're going to be looking a little bit at absolute value. Okay, so we know for all absolute values, they're greater than 0. So regardless of what a is, regardless of the sign of a, the absolute value is always greater than 0. So for example, if we had the absolute value of 8, then that's just going to equal to positive 8. For example, also if we had, say it was a negative on the inside, then absolute value is like distance, so whatever's on the inside, it just comes out as positive 8. Now, some of the tricks that some people may use is that they may put a negative sign in front of the absolute value. And in this case, you just go with the sign on the outside. So this comes back as minus 6. Or if it's minus 7 per se, then that'll just come back out as minus 7. So with absolute value, the sign on the outside, that's what the sign of the final number would be. All right. The other thing with absolute values is that suppose we have some distance, say from A to B, then that's the same from B to A. Right, so regardless, these two are equal. So if we have B here and A here, still the same as if we had A here and B here. Okay, and absolute value helps us with this. So if this was P and this was Q, the distance from P to Q is just A minus B. Okay. So let's look at this example. Find the distance between 11 and minus 4. So let's call 11P and Q minus 4. So distance from P to Q is, we just put this in absolute value, and we can have a minus 4 minus 11. That's absolute value minus 15. So this is equal to 15. Even if we did it the other way, if we put the 11 first, then we'll have minus 4. And then we'll have 11 plus 4. And that gives us absolute value of 15, which is 15. Okay, so let's say we wanted another example. Say we wanted the distance from minus 7 to 15. Again, that distance, let's call it PQ again. That distance, absolute value of minus 7 minus 15, which would be absolute value of minus 22, and that's equal to 22. Okay, let's look at another example. So in this example, well, we want the halfway point between minus 7 and 15. So we just saw already that the distance the distance from minus 7 to 15, that was 22. We already saw that. So we want to find the halfway point. Well, to find the halfway point between minus 7 to 15, we'll add minus 7 to 15 and divide that by 2. So midpoint would just be minus 7 plus 15 divided by 2. So that would be 8 divided by 2. So that would be 4. Right? And if we looked at the distance from minus 7 to 4, we see that's 11. And then from 15 to 4, we see that distance is also 11, right? So here's our midpoint. Our midpoint is 4, and then from that 4, the two ends, minus 7 and 15. So we have this interval. We have this interval from minus 7 to 15. Right? So say we want it to represent a number in here. We can also write this as minus 7 is less than x is less than 15. Right? So that could represent the interval. Now, we could also write that interval using that midpoint. Using this midpoint that we have up here of 4 and the distance from the midpoint, 11. All right? So let's see how we can do it. So how do we do it? We could do it using absolute values. So we use absolute value x, and we got to subtract the midpoint. So that's a minus. And then we're going to say it's less than 11. And so this interval from minus 7 to 15 could be represented using this midpoint of 4. The distance from the midpoint to the ends, right? And using a subtract sign inside of absolute value. So using this absolute value to represent that interval, right? And we're going to need that for our next example. So let's look at our next example. Okay, so in this next example, we have, suppose in a new community, the height of all buildings in a new community is more than 12 feet tall and less than 48 feet tall. Which of the following inequalities describe all possible heights in feet? So here we know that each building is more than 12 feet, so we can have x in the middle, but less than 48 feet. So here we have this inequality, but if we look at our answers, all our answers are in terms of absolute values. So we know to represent it in terms of absolute values, we need to find the midpoint. So the midpoint would be to add 12 plus 48 and divide that by 2. So 12 plus 48 is 60, divide that by 2. So that gives us 30. So 30 is our midpoint. Now, the distance from the midpoint to the end, in other words, say from 12 to 30, right? That distance from 12 to 30 is 18. And that distance from 48 to 30, that is also 18. So now we know using the absolute value, we're going to have x and we're going to minus that midpoint of 18. And then we're going to say it's less than that distance. So, sorry, the midpoint was 30. So let me correct this. So midpoint of 30 and the distance 18. So the midpoint goes inside here. This is our midpoint. Okay, so out of the choices, the one that matches would be D, right? So there we go. All right, so okay, here's where this video ends. I hope you liked it, and that's it for now.